To try to begin the next part of the program. So those of you who take your seats and while you're finishing your dessert, we will begin the next part of the program. One of the things that we as a committee decided early on to do is to have some of our classmates talk a little bit about what being a Juniata grad has meant to me. And so we have a number of prestigious classmates who are going to talk to us. One of the people who was supposed to talk and to begin to lead off was Barbara Cantu Davis. Many of you remember Barbara. She was a student senator. She was the training table waitress for every sport for 4 years. She was tough as nails and was a wonderful person. Barb had intended to be here tonight, but she has a son who has to go to the hospital 3 times a week for radiation, and he has some difficulties with short-term memory, so she was unable to come. But she did submit something for me to read to you, and I must say, when I read it, I smiled from ear to ear, and I cried, both. So please bear with me. I hope I will do her justice. When I thought I would be able to attend the reunion, Dave had asked if I would briefly, foolish man, talk about how going to Juniata had affected my life. I realized then that I had never really considered what life without Juniata would have been. I was a second-generation American from a big Italian family. My father was the 4th of 9 kids and the first of only 4 to graduate from high school. Upon graduation, his counselor tried to ask his family to talk his family into letting him go to college. She would find the funding. The answer was no. He had to work to help support the family. My mother quit school at 16 to go to work. Normal in those days. We were poor, but I didn't know it. Having an outhouse and taking a bath on Saturday in a galvanized tub until I was 8 was just the norm. I did well in high school, and I wanted to be a teacher. My mom wanted me to go to work. My dad insisted that I have the chance to go to college. The first person, as I suspect many of my classmates were, on either side of the family to go to college. I'm not sure why Juniata was interested in me, but they came looking for me. I had applied and was accepted to Bo Smith, one of the 7 sisters. Lori, how about a place I would have been there in my clothes from the outgrown shop in East Stroudsburg. The recruiter from Juniata came to our school and talked to me. Maybe it was because of the Juniata test. Anyone remember the Juniata test? I know Marion Oliver does. Well, I got the letters and information by the boatload, and then they gave me the best financial package, and I could afford to go to college. That was not a state teacher's college. So off I went to Juniata, where they wisely told our parents not to dare let us come home for 6 weeks. And what did I learn at Juniata? Of course, I learned the academic stuff, but I also learned that the seemingly impossible was possible with some effort. Girls could get a decent grade in Black Tom Nolan's econ class, and you could get elected to the student senate without being part of the really popular kids. I still have the pendant we were given for being on Senate. I also learned the value of work. You may remember me as a training table waitress, as I sure do, but I was also a telephone operator, a night hostess in Lesher Hall, with the odious job of chasing young men out of the dorm and making girls sign in too late. And I'm sure you never knew that I cleaned the art professor's apartment every week, and sometimes found earrings under the bed when I vacuumed. I always wondered who they belonged and never found out. I also learned that there were adults who were willing to take a very personal interest in me, like little old Professor Dougal of English Common. Remember Professor Dougal? The squeakiest voice, what a great guy. Mr. Moore at the dining hall, who always called me Barbara, and my dearly beloved Mrs. Horshack, who always had an ear to listen to my woes, to offer counsel, share stories, and who loaned me money for my last year at Juniata. I tried to show that same compassion in my students when I taught. I also remember Dean Yohe, not with great fondness, who got all excited at panty raids, but most often I think of Dean Heberling, who used to sit there very calmly and just watch to make sure that nothing got out of hand. I have tried to emulate his behavior, not very successfully because of my Italian heritage, but I have gotten better the older I have gotten. But it's probably ages and lack of energy which has caused the improvement. I was exposed to things I had never experienced. I went to a high school with two African American kids. Jeb was the football star, Ginny was the soloist for mixed chords. They were a class ahead of me, and I did not really know them. And then I went to Juniata and started to work with Gene and Bruce, one of African American and the other a pacifist. And I realized that people could really be different than I, racially or philosophically or in any other way, and I could enjoy that company and listen to their ideas. Doesn't sound very startling today, but remember, we were talking about the late 50s and early 60s, how easy it made the transition to the military, where interracial marriage was already accepted, and many of my students were biracial, and interracial dating was quite normal in the high schools where I taught. I don't know why I remember John Charney, the poet, who spoke in chapel one day. Remember John Charney? I do. He spoke in chapel one day, but I do, and also the classical music and other exposures to the arts. Never did that before either, but it has become an essential part of my life and that of my children. We have visited the great museums and the tiny decrepit ones. We have heard the great orchestras and loved the Turkish clarinetist who would come to your table and blow near your ear until you gave him the tip. I have become an invertebrate reader just because I want to know something, not because I need to know. And I made lifelong friends. I have not seen Bruce Harding since I visited him in Hong Kong in the 1960s when he was doing mission work, but we have not missed a Christmas without communicating. I have not met his wife Karen or his daughter, but would feel perfectly comfortable walking into their home today. And what would like to do have been without the Ashcroft twins, who taught me to play double-deck pinochle, which meant I frequently had to pull all-nighters to finish a paper or study for an exam because I had spent study time playing cards in the room. Again, I have not seen Faith and Tom Rupert in probably 20 or 25 years, but we still communicate, and I know and they know that we are each welcome anytime in others' homes. And then there are the guys of the training tables, some of whom thought they were pretty macho, but still went to Mass before football games on Saturday. To them I owe the deepest debt of gratitude. They have no idea what outstanding training they gave me for handling senior high boys when I was teaching. After the jello-throwing wrestlers and the guys with their insatiable appetites, there was never a high school kid who could ever intimidate me. Thank you, guys. The end result is that Juniata gave me the tools to become a teacher with an insatiable desire to learn, to see, and do more. I was employed for the Department of Defense dependent schools and lived overseas for 35 years. I've had the pleasure of living in the Philippines, Turkey, Germany, Italy, Spain, and Bahrain. I have visited every continent except Australia and Antarctica. Antarctica is not on my bucket list. My kids have had the opportunity to grow up as citizens of the world, and while I am sad that they do not have the strong sense of nationalism that I have, they are better suited for the world in which they live. And you should know that I have counseled many of my students about the tremendous advantages of attending a small college, a place like Juniata. When I asked my son to read this, his comment was that Juniata had given me so much more. When I asked him what he meant, he said simply, it gave you confidence. Confidence to be a female who was unafraid to go and do new things and not feel restricted by what society felt was appropriate for a female to do. I agreed, though I never thought in those terms. And one last story. In the Philippines, there was a high school on Clark Air Base called Wagner High School, which had no school seal for its yearbook or its classrooms. The student council, of which I was the advisor, designed that seal, which was painted large on the tallest part of the building. The motto inscribed on the seal was, Veritas Liberat, the truth sets free. It was Juniata College's motto, and Juniata did indeed free me. Thank you, Barbara. Our next person who will talk about the meaning of his Juniata education, being a Juniata grad, is Dr. Ron Plank.
Well, thank you very much. First, sound test. Can you hear me in the back? Good. All right. It's a little tough to follow that because that was absolutely eloquent. But what a wonderful weekend this has been, and how great tonight to see the Heverlings, the Kaylers, Hilda Nathan, the Hellers in the back, and all of the folks who really were part of our lives in the class of '63. What Juniata means to me is it's a tough thing to answer because there's so many levels to it. First, I would say clearly we all had a lot of things in common. For example, the camaraderie at Totem Inn, the excitement of getting a package, opening, just going to the mailbox. Remember, you cut class or something to go and see if the mail was there yet. It was the first time away from home for most of us. Certainly, it was for me, and we were a little bit in our own. We found out that we needed to study more here than we did in high school. It was harder and a little bit more demanding. We had so much that went on that we shared. But as I talked to classmates, it's clear that we all had different experiences in some way, and we took different things here. It overlaps and all of that. But we all are unique individuals and had those single experiences. Some of us focused clearly on athletics and academics, some just on academics, some on social and athletics and academics. I'm putting athletics in there because there was a clear jock group, right? And they sat at a special place at Totem Inn.
Oh, yeah.
And I sat there once. Will not do that again. Wouldn't sit there, was not welcome, but that was so nice, and you kind of were able to share things and yet have your own unique experiences. We studied, but it was a social time too, as we experienced all the interactions with people who had different backgrounds, at least to a certain extent for us. Many of us, as has been noted, came from small towns, many of us college for the first time. I had no one else in my family who had gone to college before, so this was a first for me as well. We all had the experience, though, and shared the opportunity to spread our wings. As I said, this is the first time away from home for most of us, so we had some freedoms that we had heretofore not experienced. And that was both challenging and liberating. I, for example, what Juniata means to me, found beer. Some of you think that I learned to drink beer in the Army. Not so. Here's where I learned to drink beer. In fact, this afternoon we went out to Kelly's, and they said, "Ron, jeepers, welcome back." A little embarrassing. Thank goodness my children were not with me. Now you have to understand, I grew up in a small town, close-knit family. We're brethren. Now, fortunately, I married a woman who was Catholic, so we're now Episcopalians. And when I came here, never drank. Nobody in our family drank. And so the experience with beer was liberating. It has its consequences, too, I hasten to add. Here was the experience, at least in my dreams of girls. I had absolutely gorgeous, beautiful classmates. Of course, I was too shy to ask any of them out. I wanted to talk to them. Occasionally, I talked to them. But that was kind of neat, too. And actually, I did, I think in my junior year, cautiously begin dating a little bit. we had freedoms. And you learned that freedom was wonderful, but it had its consequences. And sometimes, if you took freedom a little far, you failed, but that was okay here at Juniata because they picked you up. And you were able to do that, get back on track, maybe with a pat in the back, maybe with a pat somewhat lower, to get you back on the right track. So what I'm saying is that, at least for me, the experience here at Juniata was, everything that I've said is kind of a metaphor for a growth process, for a maturing, for transitioning into the next phase of what my life, our lives have become. I think Juniata is best for me known as a place where I began that process of transitioning from child and adolescent to adult. I was not adult here, I assure you, but I was learning to become an adult, and it's that transition that is what I think Juniata gave to me, with, of course, the social aspects, with, obviously, the education that it provided, to then allow me to do what I did and become who I am. Thank you, Juniata.